In 2023, a study showed that the average person checks their phone roughly 144 times a day.
Which is just, it's completely wild when you actually say it out loud.
Right. And it begs a really uncomfortable question. Be brutally honest with yourself here. When was the last time you sat in a room for 10 minutes without checking your phone, listening to audio, or grabbing a snack?
Just 10 unbroken minutes of, being completely unstimulated.
Exactly. No background noise, no opening a new tab, just to see what's there. For most of us, if we're forced to just sit there, we don't feel bored. We feel this intense, almost physical anxiety.
Yeah, like you're literally vibrating.
Yes. And if you're obsessed with the why behind human success and behavior, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and turn on that bell to join the Insight Lab. We drop deep dives like this every week to help you outsmart the average. Now, let's get into the data.
Because we have to talk about what that vibrating feeling actually is.
Right. Most people think hard work or sheer discipline is the answer. It's not. Today, we're breaking down the dopamine paradox and why your brain might actually be your own worst enemy.
Yeah, people think this inability to sit still is a moral failing, right? Like their willpower is just broken.
But based on the source documentation we're looking at today, that feeling isn't a lack of discipline at all. It is pure neurobiology. Your brain is just reacting to a totally unnatural environment. If you watch until the end today, you're going to see exactly how your baseline got hijacked and how to get it back.
And to do that, we have to clear up a massive misconception. If you follow any productivity spaces, you know the pop culture myth of dopamine being a pleasure chemical is just outdated.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because pop culture treats dopamine like it's the prize at the bottom of the cereal box, right? Like it's the ultimate reward.
Exactly, but the source material makes it clear that dopamine is not about pleasure. It is the molecule of anticipation.
It's the seeking chemical.
Right. It's the neurochemical drive telling you something good is about to happen, go get it. It's all about the hunt, not the catch.
So evolutionarily, we needed that massive chemical drive to leave a safe cave and go hunt or forage.
Yeah, you see the footprints of an animal and boom, dopamine spike. It tells your brain to keep going.
But what happens when the hunt is just flicking your thumb on a glass screen?
Well, you enter this state of perpetual seeking without any actual resolution. Think about scrolling a short-form video feed. The algorithm is literally designed to be unpredictable.
Which is the key, right? You never know if the next video is going to be funny or just totally boring.
Right. That unpredictability triggers what the sources call a reward prediction error. Because the outcome is uncertain, the brain releases dopamine right at the moment of the swipe. The swipe itself becomes a hunt.
Wow. So you aren't even necessarily enjoying the videos. You're just hooked on looking for the next one.
Exactly. The biological effort is near zero, but the chemical release is just continuous.
So we're triggering a survival-level hunting mechanism every 3 seconds from the couch.
Yeah, and the brain isn't built to be an infinite sponge for that. It has to defend itself.
Right, which leads to the core problem the source outlines. This concept of downregulation. What is physically happening in our heads when we flood the brain with endless digital prey?
So think about the synaptic cleft. That's the tiny gap between neurons where dopamine is released.
Yeah.
Your brain fundamentally wants homeostasis. It wants balance.
Okay.
When you scroll for 2 hours or eat highly processed junk food, you're flooding that gap with an overwhelming volume of dopamine. The receiving neuron just cannot handle it. It risks cellular damage from overstimulation.
So what does it do? How does it protect itself?
Through a process called endocytosis, the receiving neuron literally pulls its own dopamine receptors inside the cell membrane. It hides them.
Wait, it physically pulls them inside?
Yeah. It reduces the number of surface receptors, so even if there's a flood of dopamine, the cell makes itself deaf to the noise to survive the onslaught.
So is it basically like building a massive tolerance to caffeine?
Exactly.
It reminds me of the automatic gain control on an audio recorder. If you take a sensitive microphone to a rock concert, the software drops the input gain so it doesn't blow the amp. But the tragedy is, if you take that same mic with the gain turned all the way down and try to record a whisper in a library,
it won't pick up a thing.
Right. And the source highlights this perfectly. Because my receptors are hiding, my baseline is fundamentally broken.
Normal, fulfilling activities suddenly feel painfully boring.
Like reading a physical book.
Right. Reading a book or doing a long-term project. They don't flood the brain. They produce a slow, subtle chemical signal. But your receptors are used to the screaming volume of social media.
So that subtle signal of a book just doesn't register. You get bored, you get that vibrating anxiety, and you reach for the phone again.
Exactly. You're trapped.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back a bit. Because if we want to coax those receptors out of hiding, the source suggests this pro-reset, a 24 to 48-hour dopamine detox.
Yeah, the rules are strict. No screens, no junk food, no drugs or alcohol.
You just journal, walk, or meditate. But for a modern person, that sounds completely terrifying.
It's definitely not easy.
It feels like a crash diet. Like if I lock my phone in a drawer for a weekend, won't my brain just scream for a hit and cause a massive binge on Monday morning?
That's a valid concern, but the discomfort is actually the entire point. This isn't about just punishing yourself. You're creating a chemical vacuum to trigger upregulation.
Upregulation. So the opposite of what we just talked about.
Right. When you starve the brain of that dopamine flood for a couple of days, the neuron realizes the environment is quiet again. So it pushes those receptors back out to the surface.
It turns the mic game back up.
Exactly. The intense restlessness you feel during those 48 hours, that's the literal feeling of your brain recalibrating.
Yeah.
You are forcing it to find value again in slow dopamine.
But, we can't all live in a tech-free cave every weekend, right? We have lives. We have jobs.
Which is why the source provides a daily framework. The weekend reset is useless if your daily life is just a minefield of cheap dopamine traps.
Okay, so let's break down that framework. The text calls it friction and fuel. Let's start with friction.
Friction is just making bad habits harder, putting literal obstacles between you and the artificial spikes.
Like putting the phone in another room while you work.
Exactly. Willpower is a finite resource. If your phone is sitting right next to your keyboard, you are burning metabolic energy, actively trying not to look at it. Eventually, biology wins.
Right, but if it's in the other room, the biological cost of getting up outweighs the reward of the scroll.
Precisely. You remove the decision.
There's another friction tactic in here that I find fascinating. Switching your phone screen to grayscale, making it black and white.
Yeah.
But does making the screen ugly actually work? We still know the apps are there.
It absolutely works because it targets that visual prediction error. The vibrant red of a notification badge isn't an accident. Red is an evolutionary trigger for urgency.
Oh, wow. So they are hacking our visual cortex.
100%. When you use grayscale, a gray badge doesn't trigger the same neurochemical urgency. You're killing the visual hunt. The phone just becomes a boring piece of utility glass.
That makes so much sense.
Okay.
Okay, so that's friction. What about fuel?
Fuel is prioritizing activities that give you long-term rewards. Exercise, deep work, learning a complex skill.
Right, doing the hard thing first.
Yes. In a downregulated state, your brain expects the reward before the effort. Fuel trains your brain to endure the friction of, say, a workout, so the dopamine is released as a sustained reward after.
It relinks exertion with satisfaction.
Exactly.
Now, there was one specific tactic here that bridges friction and fuel, and it's the low dopamine morning. Basically, no phone for the first hour after waking up. Why is that specific time of day so crucial?
Because of the basal ganglia. It's a part of the brain that handles habits and the routine reward loop. When you wake up, it's essentially booting up and calibrating its tempo for the day based on your first inputs.
So if my first input is grabbing my phone in bed and absorbing 30 different high-velocity TikToks,
You're slamming the basal ganglia into a highly reactive, seeking state. You're programming it for distraction.
wow.
By protecting that first hour, you keep it calm. You manage your daily dopamine budget.
Right, because if you spend 80% of your budget scrolling before 9 a.m., you have nothing left in the tank for deep work at 2 p.m.
Exactly. Mastering this reward system means mastering your life.
Which is a perfect segue into the Insight Lab protocol. We don't just want to give you theory, we want to give you a tool you can use tomorrow.
Let's hear it.
Step 1, the low dopamine morning. Protect that first hour. Drink water, look out a window, do not look at a screen. Step 2, friction. Turn your phone to grayscale right now. Step 3, fuel. Do one high-effort, slow dopamine task before noon.
It's a solid, practical framework.
It really is. And it leaves me with this final kind of provocative thought for you to mull over. We spend so much time defining ourselves by our perceived flaws.
Absolutely. I'm just lazy, or I'm a procrastinator.
Exactly. But if our motivation, our focus, and even our boredom are dictated by how hijacked our dopamine receptors are, How much of your core personality is actually just a biological reaction to your environment?
That is the real question.
Are you truly procrastinating, or are you just operating on a broken baseline?
When you understand the mechanism, you realize you aren't fighting your character. You are fighting your environment.
Such a powerful reframe. But if you realized your IQ and your dopamine baseline are a trap, you're only halfway there.
Oh, totally.
Because the way you sleep actually determines if you can use that baseline at all.
Yeah.
Watch our breakdown on the billionaire sleep myth right here to complete the puzzle. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive, and we'll see you the next one.